Hello, everybody. Yes, this is Mike Meyers on his daily Ask Mike Anything. This is a little group that we've been putting together. We're going to be doing this for the duration through coronavirus, certainly. The goal of this live stream is to give you guys the opportunity to ask me questions, hopefully things that are particularly pertinent to the CompTIA certification exams, from IT fundamentals all the way through Security Plus, although we can talk about almost anything to some extent. So the important thing is that be aware that we can talk about anything we want to talk about. Well, keep away from religion or politics, but other than that, I'm your boy for conversation. All right, so anyway, first of all, just because you are kind enough to show up here, we are offering 60% discount on, oh, I said this wrong yesterday, sorry, on our A Plus and Network Plus bundles. So that is going to be practice questions and simulations, but it's just for A Plus and Network Plus, and that's as a 60% deal, which is redonkulously good deal for my stuff. And you take the food from the mouths of my children, but I don't care. It's a good cause. Also, if you are an instructor who is actively teaching a course right now, Total Seminars is ready to open the gates for you. All you have to do is contact Kathy Yale of our office. Scott Jernigan, my buddy's going to type that in. Oh, by the way, in order to take advantage of that 60% deal for A Plus and Net Plus bundles, you're going to have to use this code. Scott, I'm going to count on you to help me out and punch that in as well. Cool. Scott's got the code in. It's just so amazing. I just love this guy. What's happened since I spoke to you last? Well, number one, we had a nice little rain squall that came through Houston. And for those of you who've been hanging around, I had a huge amount of sewer work done. And I woke up this morning and looked down and discovered a huge sinkhole. It looks like they didn't put enough dirt in after they dug the hole and filled it back in again. There's a joke in there somewhere. I don't know where it is. So they're bringing in trucks and they're going to pack more dirt into my suddenly collapsed sinkhole. Don't buy a house. It's not worth it, kids. Forget about it. What else has been happening that's particularly noteworthy? Oh, I had an interesting thing take place. I've got a little picture I want to show you. So a friend of mine brought by their cat, and the cat wanted to go outside. And the cat tried to go outside and immediately tried to jump over the fence. I'm not going to be chasing kitties late at night, so we had to leave the cat indoors. And the cat found an old pet door that I had that I don't use anymore. And I took a picture of possibly the scariest photograph I've ever seen. How utterly terrifying is that? And of course, Kitty is sitting there and scratching and meowing. It just got all Twilight Zone. All is well though, and life continues anon here at Shea Myers. So anyway, today what I want to talk about is virtual machines versus containers. I've got a presentation on it, but I got to be honest with you, I don't feel that I go really deeply into either virtual machines or containers. I mean, because the actual question that was originally posed to me is, really what's the difference? So now I'm a little nervous. And what I'm going to be wanting you guys to do, and this is very important that I get some information from you, is if you want me to do a big, deep virtualization presentation, I can do that. If you want me to do a big, deeper containers, which is really this thing called Docker, I can do that as well. I think I got a good balance today, but I'm going to let you guys be the judge. And we will certainly be covering most, if not all, of the topicalities that you'd see on CompTIA A Plus, Net Plus, Security Plus. But we could go deeper. Wouldn't necessarily hurt. But I'm going to have to hear what you guys have to say about all that kind of stuff. Yeah, poor kitty, my rear. That's there's my buddy Wissa there. Yeah, the cat tried to jump over the fence, and I was not going to go ringing up my neighbors saying, can I come in your backyard and try to find a cat? Yeah, that was not going to happen. Nope. So anyway, well, there's not going to be any contest today, so if you're just here for the giveaways, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday, right? I am totally losing track of time. This is becoming bizarre. I need keepers. Also, if you guys noticed from yesterday, yeah, we had fun with the green screen, but it was kind of a thing where I was experimenting with it, and I really have to come up with a reason to use it. And besides, you get this wonderful background here. You get to look at all my books and everything. So I don't know. I have that capability, and with great power comes great responsibility. I'll bring it back once it comes up with a reason to do it. I don't want to look too much like a certain competitor of mine. We'll just leave it like that. All right, so anyway, let's take a look and see who's here today. Wissa, it's so cool to see you. How you doing? Today's Wednesday? Really? Is today Wednesday? I'm not even being a smart aleck. Oh, Lord, it is Wednesday. Okay. Yeah, so I hired a nutritionist. I think I mentioned that yesterday. So now I'm just eating gruel. Actually, it's pretty good food. Everything's completely prepackaged. I'm trying to, stop the cheating. So we'll see what happens. And I worked out again today. And yes, I'm still wearing my workout shorts. Totally street legal, but I look good from the waist up, so I'm happy. All right. Timothy Bessett, you want to do SD-WANs? What? SD-WAN, software-defined WANs, is actually kind of an interesting topic. There's really not much of it in terms of the CompTIA to discuss. Let me talk to the Brain Trust, and we'll see if something happens there. Gino's grabbing his lunch. Pise is here. Mr. Sosa. Who else is here? Alan Duggan. Tolowit again. Tony Cecchini. Hey, Tony. Hey, how's it going? I used to live in New York City, and man, I loved, there were two cultures that I became very steeped in, and there was the Jewish guys, and because my last name's Myers, they all just assumed I was Jewish, so I got to celebrate some really cool Purims, and I still got a stack of yarmulkes hidden away somewhere, and then all the Italian guys, and even back then, we're still, Little Italy was around, and it was a lot of fun, and still a lot of good friends, and I kind of miss New York City. I want to get back there and just hang out and have some fun with everybody. Okay. Anyway, so let's see who else is talking to me today. Batman's here. Yeah, okay, it's Wednesday. I'm sorry. Forgot what day of the week it was. I'm wearing matching socks. You guys got to cut me a little slack there. Ernie Casillas, yes. Coane Lamont, hey, there you are. Coane, didn't I see you on LinkedIn? Is that not where I remember you from? Elvis Navarro, hello, me, Mr. Myers. Hola, Elvis. Thanks, Wissa. Andrew Hutz. Man, we got like the whole crew is here. Hang on, there's a cat invasion going on at my house here. David Burns, hi Mike, I had a question about the online exam. You mentioned yesterday something about losing connectivity and CompTIA saying, oh well. Is it pretty much their standard response across the board? No. David, I've talked to about 15 people now who have tested successfully and found it convenient and wonderful and not a problem at all. The person mentioned is not a person I know on a personal basis. I don't know what they did. I can tell you that if you stick to the rules, this is the only time we've heard this thus far. So that person may very well be on right now, so I don't want to deny their veracity, but I don't have any details on that one particular situation. So if I were to be testing, I would not let online slow me down at this point in the game. But I would make very, very sure that wherever I was being tested was a very plain room that didn't have anything on the walls, and I wasn't trying to do anything clever. In particular, trying to plug stuff in or unplug stuff during the actual test itself. I would also make sure I had a good internet connection, and also make sure I had a good computer. I mean, there's a certain amount, that was a scary situation that I talked to you about yesterday, but upon more due diligence, I find it to be, I'm not so sure who the bad guy was, or if anybody was a bad guy. It was one of these fluke situations, and I don't think that is something that would be repeated. But I did hear this anecdotally. It is not slowing me down on a personal basis. How's that for an answer and a half? Ports and laser printers are killing you for the A+ 1001, Joe Sosa? Thanks, Henry. I understand. It is tough. I really am losing track of time. Joe, I'll tell you what, just for you, brother, we can do a little ports rote memorization thing tomorrow if you guys want to. It's going to be boring. It's basically going to be, I'll put up a table and make you memorize them or something. You know what? Fine. Scott Jernigan, tomorrow it's ports. And we're going to give away at least 2 $25 gift certificates tomorrow. Don't forget, Friday's our big giveaway day. But tomorrow I'm going to give away 2 $25 gift certificates to GameStop. Everybody loves those. I wish I could have some of these. And just come up with ways to quickly memorize. So if you're a ringer, be nice, okay? Andre is back. I mean, I want to go to the Netherlands. I mean, I want to go anywhere right now. I get out of my house about once every 3 days. Well, that's not true. I work out in a park because all the gyms are closed. Doesn't anybody else just miss going to a restaurant? Like having a waiter and a white tablecloth and have appetizers and a good bottle of wine and, you know, I miss it. I'm just a very, very social animal, so I have to, sorry guys, I'm watching people do stuff. They're trying to fix my sinkhole. But I miss getting out there. I'm a dancer. I like to dance. I can't even go dancing or anything these days. I'm hate it. All right. Peter Hunt. I'm in St. Lucia, currently I'm in Texas. Hey, well, I thought there was something about you I liked. Couldn't put my finger on it there, Peter. Good to be in Texas. Yeehaw. I love being in Texas. No state income tax, warm weather, libertarian attitude. I like Texas. Fishing. I was hoping I could buy the vouchers off your website to schedule my exam date, and I was told I can't get it. My card is... Yeah, dude, Peter, they just tie our hands on this stuff, amigo. I'm sorry. It's we are real tight. The one thing I will tell you, Peter Hunt, is that I think if you go on the CompTIA site, they actually might have a slightly better deal than what we have. It might already be passed. I don't know, but they had like a 20% off deal. It was pretty short. It might still be on. You might want to check it out. Greg Davis. David Burns, yes. Yeah, David, I was nervous too. And then after getting more information about that particular situation, I'm much less nervous. What are your thoughts on a Netgear C6300 cable modem router? Tony, I'm not particularly familiar with that exact one. I mean, right now I could do a quick Google search and see if anybody's complaining about it. The two big things I look for is, number one, am I already paying rent on a cable modem box? Am I paying $5, $7, $12 a month? That's going to be a strong motivator to go for a box like the one you're describing. Also, is bandwidth. So you want to make sure that you've got something that can handle the bandwidth of whatever your cable is. So, you know, in the low gigabits per second is something I look for. It's fairly easily achieved. The other thing I'm going to look for in a router is there's certain feature sets that I really want. For example, is this C6300, is it also a WAP? I'm really into mesh these days, and I prefer to have a wireless router that is, I prefer to have a router, even I'm doing it. I prefer to have a router that does not have WAP anymore, because I'd rather just handle that separately. And if I can save a couple of bucks, great. If not, if I can turn it off, that's great too. You can usually turn them all off these days. Also, the other thing I'd be looking for on this is this going to be able to support the upcoming WPA3? A lot of these routers, and here, John, I'm telling you, don't get a wireless, but if it is a wireless, make sure that it can support WPA3, or at least they're claiming that it can. That's going to be a big upgrade. It should be a firmware upgrade for most of these devices. It's not like we're changing radio frequencies or anything, but it would be something that would be of great interest to me. I don't have any answers. Hey, Scott Jernigan, why don't you do a quick Google search on this Netgear C6300, see if anybody's saying bad things about it. But yeah, it's a good idea to always get your own equipment. Ernie Casillas, California. ¿Dónde está en California, amigo? I like California. The further north I go in California, the more I like it. because, I go up at the top, of course, for me at least, is Napa, coming down through Sacramento and down through there. And I like San Diego. It's a great zoo. I don't know. California people it's always a little strange out there to me. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to scroll. There we go. Brandon Swenson is here. We're okay now. MJ's back. Man, we got everybody here. This is great. So WISA, I know here in Texas that some of these restaurants are opening, but from what I heard is that they can only put in like 1/4 of the people and social distancing and people walking around in bunny suits to serve me a hamburger. I'm not quite sure that that's the restaurant experience I'm dreaming about, but it is something. I won't. Okay, ports on Thursday for the win. We will do it. That'll be fun. Ooh, lots of good questions here. Sorry. CH, what tool do you recommend to try and recover an SSD? Crucial. Well, I mean, the best tool I would use to recover an SSD would be your brain. Can you see the SSD? That's really the important. Does BIOS recognize it? If BIOS doesn't recognize it, you're probably in a recovery situation. If BIOS does recognize it, to be honest with you, check disk, even on an SSD, can be handy. But the question I would like you, so CH, here's the question. Can you see the drive in your system setup? I'm going to see if you can answer that for me, then I can give you a little more stuff there. Elvis Navarro, Mike, I have a good question. Well, of course it's a good question, Elvis. You're answering it. You're asking it. We're living with COVID-19. Yes, we are. How, as ITIs, can we help make contributions during this crisis? Wow, that's a kind of a heavy question. Well, at least in my case, it's easy because I'd reach out to you guys, right? I'm not going to sit here and volunteer you to go volunteering to help people out. I would stay in close contact with those who are near and dear to you and make sure that you have some skill sets, particularly on communications tools, Zoom. I'm not just talking about changing the background in Zoom. Skype, for example, whatever your Google tool you want to use, or what's that thing, FaceTime, that the Apple people use, and make sure your skill sets are up to speed on that, because people are calling me like crazy for support, and so I'm squaring up on my phone support skills. I used to be the type of person, I was like, I don't give away free information, but I've loosened up on that a lot as of late, as people are just kind of stuck. They need help. Joe, I will do port memorization tomorrow, but you're not going to like it, all right? Because it's like, it's just hard work. But you'll do it. Tomorrow is port memorization. Okay. Henry Bruzo agrees with you. So between Joe and Henry, we're going to do this. Drummer Dude, 1988. Why does SFTP and SSH share the same port number? Because SFTP runs on SSH. SSH, people forget that SSH is a lot more than just a encrypted telnet. SSH has tunneling functions, which allows you to run just about anything within an SSH tunnel. Man, Scott, Scott Jernigan, weren't we going to be doing remote desktop stuff? I'll tell you what, when we do remote desktop, I will include SSH tunneling because it's cool. And I mean, you can use it for a lot of stuff. For example, FTP and get SFTP. But it's so the answer is, Drummer Dude, is that it's because it's using an SSH tunnel. Yeah, I'm going to the park. Can you believe I'm actually doing push-ups again? Pain is good, right? So yeah, Wissa, so the restaurants are opening up here in Houston. Yeah, all my exes live in Texas too, Timothy. Isn't that crazy? Allison, I'm glad you agree with me, man. So you do karaoke? I do karaoke too. I have a voice like a sailor. It dies at sea. So I got a funny story to share with you guys. About 1 billion years ago, me and Scott Jernigan were in New York City. McGraw-Hill used to be based out of New York City. Now they're in San Francisco, at least the part of McGraw-Hill we're interested in. So we're hanging out in some little bar. And it ends up that the entourage of McGraw-Hill guys were actually pretty good singers. Scott Jernigan is an amazing singer. Just he's a bard, you know, like Whiskey in a Jar and all those great old songs. And Scott he's a great singer. I can carry a note in a bucket, but that's about it. And anyway, we had a few of these McGraw-Hill guys who could sing. So we all start cutting loose, singing these, you know, great old Irish songs and all this stuff. And we're singing away, having a good time, and sounded pretty good. And all of a sudden, we're kind of in a circle, and Scott Jernigan is directly across from me. And we're all singing, and all of a sudden the actor who plays Tony Soprano, James Gandolfini, who's a was, God rest his soul, was a big guy. And I remember here's Scott just, whiskey in a jar, and James Gandolfini is a head taller than Scott, and Scott's not exactly short. And Gandolfini's just like, and he walked through. There's my name drop for the day. Man, you guys really all want to do ports tomorrow. Ports it is. Ports it is, and we'll have a competition. But it's just rote memorization. I don't have any clever way. I'll have some tables. Okay. Speaking of, guys, whenever we have questions come around, one of the things I really would like you to do is consider contacting me directly. Especially if a more complicated question. Like the one today took me a few days to put it together. I thought I was going to have this knocked out. But it just took me a couple of days, and we'll probably want to develop it more anyway. But anyway, send me an email. So you see either that Michael M. or DesWeds at ProtonMail. Either of those will get to me, no problem. The Steam account is for gamers. That number will forward to me in some cases. I've got a screener, thank goodness for Mandy. But if you really need to get a hold of me, I will take your calls, but you're going to have to get through Miss Mandy, who is my best friend ever, okay? And then if you want to get a hold of me, when in doubt, just use DesWeds. I'm DesWeds at everything. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you need to find me anywhere, I'm DesWeds. So anyway, let's go ahead and I'm going to let you guys build up a few more questions. Oh wait, Terrence Tech has a good one here. Mike, if cumulative updates on Win 10 constantly fails, but all other updates go through, is that a problem with the server of the computer? I would guess for the computer, if it's just cumulative updates. Are you on a domain? Do you have a policy that's preventing that? Are there some weird permissions that have been set that are preventing things from getting where they want to go? I would need more information before I could answer that question for you. Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and take a moment and let's do what we're going to do now is a comparison of containers versus virtual machines. I need to warn you, I assume you know a little bit about virtual machines on this. If I go over your head, we can have another day, it'll probably be next week now the way things are filling up, but we can have a much more in-depth virtual machine discussion. We could go a little bit deeper on containers also if you guys wanted to. That's going to be completely up to you. But anyway, let's go ahead and start talking about this a little bit. All right, so time for the PowerPoints. Okay, so anyway, what I want you guys to do is take a look at this image right here, okay? On the left, we have a graphic that describes virtual machines, and then on the right, we have a graphic that defines containers, okay? So to start off, let's go ahead and take a look on the left-hand side. And when you have a virtual machine, what you have is, let's start at the bottom, way down here. So we've got this infrastructure, great. Now, the thing about the infrastructure is that that's really just the hardware of the system, That's all that means. So directly above the infrastructure is a hypervisor. The hypervisor is actually the software that makes virtual machines work. Now I need to be careful here because if the hypervisor is installed on top of the host operating system, then we call that a Type 2 hypervisor. And probably one of the more famous ones is good old Oracle's VirtualBox these days. Now there's another way to do this though. If we get rid of the operating system and we install the hypervisor as the bootable operating system, as we say, we install it on bare metal, we now have what's known as a Type 1 hypervisor. And probably the two most famous Type 1 hypervisors are going to be VMware and Windows Server. Hyper-V, sorry, not Windows Server. Hyper-V, Hyper-V, Hyper-V. Now, you got to be real careful here. It's really easy to go get a copy of VirtualBox, Oracle's VirtualBox, install it on your system, and start building virtual machines. Real easy. It's also pretty easy to use Hyper-V, but I just told you that Hyper-V is a Type 1 where it's installed directly on the bare metal. Pay attention, kids. This gets people in trouble all the time. Hyper-V, when you've got a regular Windows system, okay, you got a Windows 10 professional system, and you decide to install Hyper-V, great. What you're actually doing, and you got to be aware of this, is when you install Hyper-V on a Windows system, you're installing a Type 1 hypervisor. And that nice Windows system that you have is now a virtual machine. Yep. It works great. In fact, there are some aspects of Hyper-V that I find very, very superior to VirtualBox, certainly, and even in some extents VMware, although VMware is a juggernaut. But do be aware that if you install Hyper-V on a Windows system, you're literally turning your own good old Windows that you boot up into now becomes a virtual machine. And they can do a pretty good job of hiding it. And there's nothing wrong with it, just be aware that that happens. Okay. All right, so make sure you, but the important thing as we take a look at this is that the hypervisor itself can't do anything that the infrastructure doesn't have. If the infrastructure doesn't include a sound card, yeah, I know, but I mean, if it didn't, the hypervisor can't emulate that. If the infrastructure didn't have any USB ports, the hypervisor can't emulate that. It can only virtualize what the infrastructure already has. So then, you then have individual guest operating systems. Now the thing is a virtual machine just lets you make the virtual machine. So you can go to VirtualBox and spin up a virtual machine. And one of the things that VirtualBox does, for example, it'll say, oh, so what kind of operating system you going to install? And you'll say, I'm going to install Ubuntu. And that's great, but people are thinking, oh, in some way, because I've set up a VM that's going to be for 64-bit Ubuntu, I have to install Ubuntu. No, all they're really doing there is they're trying to get some idea of what you're going to install so it has enough hardware specification to it. It has enough RAM set aside, has enough storage space, whatever you need. When you do that, that's all that's really taking place. You could install Windows in that same virtual machine. But what's important here is once you make the virtual machine, the only thing a VM does is virtualizes the machine, the hardware itself. You're still going to have to go out. You want to get a copy of Windows? You're going to have to go pay for it and then install it in there. But Mike, I already have Windows. I'm just going to run a Windows virtual machine on top of a Type 2 hypervisor like VirtualBox. Tough bananas, you're still going to have to do that. Now obviously Linux, because it's free, that makes life a lot easier, and you can install that just fine. And the other thing you cannot do is if you're on a Windows or a true Linux system, you can't put Apple operating systems on there. There's no laws of physics preventing it. It just, Apple doesn't like that. So they work hard to make that not happen. If you want a Mac virtual machine, you have to have a Mac real machine first. That's attorneys, not laws of physics. Okay. Anyway, let's go look at the screen one more time. So if we take a look at this now, underneath this, and I'm going to put all this together. See where it says App A, bins and libraries, App B, bins and libraries, App C. To me, that's all the same thing. Once you've installed a guest OS, let's say it's Windows, then you can install Windows apps along with their binaries and libraries, all that stuff. Binaries, the executables, the EXEs, libraries, DLLs, and other kind of animals like that that allow the system itself to do whatever voodoo it needs to do. All right, so what I want to do now is spin this around a little bit. So let's go ahead and take a look at containers for a minute. So at the very bottom, we have our infrastructure. That's our hardware. Notice here, we have a host operating system. So you go, wait, infrastructure, host operating system, that's a type 2 hypervisor. No, it's just a host operating system. The trick about containers have been around for a very, very long time. And containers were around in the mainframe days. If a virtual machine virtualizes the hardware, a container virtualizes the operating system. Get it? So what it's going to do is it's going to take whatever your host operating system is, and it's going to create a little bubble that allows applications to work within that bubble. Even though containers have been around for a very, very long time, right now when most people talk about containers, they talk about a very specific program, a very wildly popular program called Docker. So if you want to talk about this stuff, you're going to be talking about Docker. Okay, so, well, what is Docker? Number one, Docker allows you to develop your applications and it's supporting components using containers. Yes, I've copied these words directly from Docker. But it does a lot more than that. The container becomes the unit for distributing and testing your application. And when you're ready to deploy your application, you can just go through a process of publishing it, as they say, and putting it onto production boxes. So when we're talking about Docker, Docker uses containers to mainly allow programmers to do web app development. And that's really its cornerstone. It can do more than that. Containerization can do more than that. But right now, when we're talking about containerization, we're talking about Docker, and we're talking about the amazing power that Docker has using containers, as well as other stuff, to make it a lot easier for programmers to get their new web pages up or whatever, their new game, whatever it is. As long as it's run in a browser, Docker is your best buddy, okay? And again, it does a little more than that, but that tends to be the thing when people get excited about it. All right. One of the big things that tools like Docker do as opposed to a virtual machine is they're much lighter weight. When I'm talking about lighter weight, what I'm saying is that instead of having to spin up a complete VM when maybe I've written a few new lines of code and I just want to see what it looks like. Just want to fire it up. Lighting up a new container is a lot less overhead than going through the process of lighting up a new virtual machine. This becomes like a really big deal, especially when you have a lot of apps that are on a single system. To have a bunch of containers running, that is nothing compared to the amount of system resources, in particular RAM more than anything else, that gets eaten up by virtual machines. So containers are smaller, and that is a good thing. Somebody's ringing my doorbell. Miss Sandy is going to come to my rescue and take care of that. Okay, anyway, we're back. Sorry about that, guys. Hey, this is the trials and tribulations of having to deal with this stuff in your house. Sorry. All right, anyway, back to the presentation. Thank you, Sandy.
Sorry.
Everybody's saying hi to you.
Hi.
All right. The other big thing that tools like Docker bring is consistency between machines. This can become a really big deal when you have a lot of developers and you're trying to get a consistent application to work. The problem is that subtle differences between one developer's machine versus another can cause a lot of pain and suffering. By having everything in the identical containers, even in different machines, they will act the same, which is actually very, very powerful. Okay. In order to understand how Docker works, you have to understand that it's a client-server tool. So first of all, you're going to have some pizza box somewhere, which is going to be, in this case, we'll just call it a web server, but it is also a Docker server, and it's running a daemon that is a Docker daemon called Dockerd. And the idea is that we publish up to this. Now keep in mind, there's other ways to do this, but this is the easiest way to look at all this. And then secondly, we're going to have some kind of Docker client. And this is usually the system that you're actually writing the code on, and then you go through a process of publishing it, setting it up to a Docker server. Again, there can be other ways to do this. I'm just giving one particular example, and then you can get all of this done very, very easily. In fact, if you think about it a little bit, Docker, especially if I'm in a cloud-based environment, really is nothing more than platform as a service, because I can completely make the hardware transparent to the individual programmers, and all they're doing is schlepping up code and saying go, and it works, and it's absolutely fantastic. So that is a very nice analogy when you think about stuff like Docker. It's platform as a service. It's like Heroku, but you don't have to pay anybody. So yeah, that's right. Docker is completely free. There's some stuff that attaches to it that costs money, but Docker is free. And everybody loves it. You will not meet a programmer who's doing web apps who doesn't know Docker. All right. Now, the big pieces to containers are really two pieces. Number one, there's an image. An image is all the executable files and libraries and fonts, whatever the app needs to be able to live in a container. And this is all very much defined. It can define things like, what port is this thing listening on? Well, Mike, I thought we were all in port 80. Well, you can change it if you want. What about an IP address? You can change the IP addresses. What about environment variables? Those can all be changed. So it's not just the application. It is all of the environment features that that application needs to be able to run well. So the image is a bunch of files that sits on a hard drive. Container, though, is actually the running virtualized operating system. So you create an image file, and then you go through a process of publishing a container onto the Docker server itself. This brings a lot of big features, but probably the most important one is, just like virtual machines are isolated from the actual host system, containers are isolated from the host operating system. So it gives them a very high degree of protection. All right. So what I want to do now is actually kind of take a look at some of this stuff. And I get worried. In fact, let me see if any questions have popped up, since I didn't get to look at my screen in quite some time. Where are you guys? I'm just looking for questions. Bear with me. Is a container a sandbox? Hang on, I need to go. I got a few more questions beyond that. Sorry, Terrence, I'm going to have to hang on for that one. Is there a reason you'd want to install Hyper-V on bare metal? There's a lot of very good reasons. Any serious hypervisor is going to be type 1. VirtualBox is great as a training tool, and it's powerful, but I can't even begin to, the economies of scale, the efficiencies of getting a host operating system out of the way. And unfortunately, it's really boring to look at, like VMware's ESX or ESXi, whatever's still out there these days. If I actually walked you over to my Dell system, the virtual machine server, and we booted it up, put a monitor on it and looked, you'd be bored to tears. There's really not much there. By getting rid of the host operating system, we just make everything work a lot faster. You end up, like, you build virtual machines and stuff like that, is you have some type of client software that's a not necessarily third party, it's usually made by the same company. And you remote into that server to actually go through the process of creating or deleting virtual machines, manipulating them, whatever you might want to do. So is there a reason you'd want to install Hyper-V on bare metal? Yeah, because if you're actually making it work for a living, like seriously work for a living. I would also recommend that if you've never done it, everybody needs to install Hyper-V once. I would not want to do it on a main system. It's my understanding that it's painful to get rid of Hyper-V. I haven't done the research on that in 4 years, so I wouldn't want to do that. This is where you bring up another system. But I got to tell you though, Hyper-V has some feature sets that make it very, very attractive to me. Like for example, they will virtualize a switch. Okay, all of them virtualize a switch, but Hyper-V does it in a way that makes a lot more sense. It can be very frustrating. For example, if you're in VirtualBox, and what you want to do is you want to set up 3 virtual machines, okay? You don't want them on the internet because you're just playing with stuff, right? But you want them to all kind of plug into their own switch. VirtualBox does that, but they don't make it obvious. You have to set up networks and then you connect people to these networks. Hyper-V does it a lot better. There's actually a switch that you can make people connect to. Little things like that. Yeah, so the reason why you put Hyper-V on bare metal is because you're doing real work and not just playing and studying for an A+ or Net+. Docker's pants, I'm lost. Did I really say that, Paul Murphy? Is a container a sandbox? Whoa, wait a minute. That being said, would wine be considered a container? David, I'm not super familiar with wine. That's the Mac tool, right? I don't think it is, but I don't know. The right answer is I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we can get Michael Smyer or somebody on here who's got more skill on wine to be able to answer that question. Is a container a sandbox? A sandbox is some type of technology upon which we play. It could be, but usually if we got a bunch of programmers who are working hard to develop an application, there's nothing sandboxy about that. They're by the time they actually start publishing, and by the way, Docker has all these wonderful controls about, version controls and stuff like that. It probably wouldn't be sandboxy. Maybe on some early research stuff, which might be some kind of little fork where the coders are playing. But again, probably Michael Smyer would be able to answer that question. I'm not going to say better, but more thoroughly than I can. But my quick answer is a container can do sandbox functions if needed. It's like saying, I could say a server could act as a sandbox if I'm just R&Ding on it. Does that help? Paul Murphy, I don't remember saying Docker's pants. I'm sorry, brother. Hi, is everybody knocking on everybody's door right now? Are dockers and docking stations the same thing? Wandi, are you teasing me a little bit? No, they're very, very different things. Is Apple's Boot Camp Type 1? I don't think so, Diego. But again, Apple is not a superpower land for me. Yeah, wine is an emulator. Thank you, Nico. I just plain old forgot. Oh, you were making a pun. Thank you, Paul. I get all serious because I want to answer people's questions, And all of a sudden it's like, I don't know. It's tough. I'm pushing 60, man, which is like ancient in this industry. So I always want to be hip to you kids' 23 skidoo language. I waste a lot of my time in Urban Dictionary, to say the least. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and take a moment, and I'd like to take a quick peek at a virtual machine, and then what we're going to do from there is let's take a quick peek at a very simple Docker setup that I have over here on my system. So let me get that to come up real quick. Is anything going to be cooperative today? Okay, so let's start here. Hang on, bear with me, guys. I will never ever make fun of directors again. Gosh, they make my life so much easier. All right, so what you're looking at here is this is a virtualized system. It's running Ubuntu server, and we can actually see this. And I'm using VirtualBox. The main reason I like VirtualBox is just pretty. Whoops, that wasn't good. That was really bad. There we go. VirtualBox for an instructional tool is fabulous because it's kind of graphical and makes things easy to look at. So what I've got here is I've got 4 virtual machines running right now. I'm sorry, I got 4 installed, only 1 is running. You see the running right there? That's that Ubuntu server you just saw. So this is powered off. So what I'm going to do is go over to settings, and you can see there's all kinds, like how much memory do I want to have in there? Do I want to support a floppy disk or a hard disk? Oh, that's a boot order right there. Floppy disk, yeah, I know there's no more floppy disks. It means thumb drives with this guy. Storage. Remember, when you're using a Type 2 hypervisor like this, when we did RAID, we can add lots and lots of drives to this system. For example, I'm just going to throw another hard drive in here. Now, these are the different types of drives. So VirtualBox, VHD, and VMDK, those are from VMware. So we're just going to create one. It's going to give it an arbitrary size. Notice I can give it any size I want. That doesn't mean it's going to eat that much space up on my system, okay? Ooh, that brings up a good point. When you're setting aside resources for virtual machines, and this is an A+ question, virtual machine servers, the machines that are actually hosting the hypervisor, need more RAM than you can imagine, because every virtual machine is going to actually grab the amount of RAM that you specify, which can be a real problem. You can run out of RAM very, very quickly. I don't remember how many hundreds of gigabytes of RAM our virtual machine server has, but it's a lot, and we use it. So that one you have to be careful with. With hard drives, you can be a lot more flexible. And by the way, you can change this. So if you decide to set a drive to like a really small size, like 50 gig, and suddenly decide you want it to be bigger, you can make them bigger. It's just usually pushing a dial around. Anyway, let's get back to this. All right, so I'm going to VDI as the VirtualBox default image. So I'm going to go ahead and create this guy. And you'll see I now have a drive in there. Now the thing is, if I want to take advantage of this drive, I'm going to have to boot an operating system and use, like if it's Windows, use disk management or whatever it is to get the drive mounted, initialized, partitioned, formatted, the whole shebang. But it's kind of cool. And for those of you guys who were watching last week when we did RAID, that's how I was able to make those nice RAID demos, because I just took a virtual machine and put a bunch of virtual drives in it. Ta-da! Worked great. All right, let's get back in here. Network is a cool one. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but you can decide how this virtual machine connects. It has a NAT where it's going to hide behind its own IP address, which is generated by VirtualBox. We can have bridged where it will just become another system. It'll grab whatever IP address is on your domain. Internal network, which means we're not connecting to anybody but ourselves. Host only means I'm only connected myself, and generic driver is not something I want to get into right now. The other thing is nice is like USB. Now, VirtualBox is a little weird with this stuff, because if I click on, oh, I got it installed. So I can say what type of connections I want. I can create virtualized USB if I want to. VirtualBox is a little bit tricky to install sometimes, because you install VirtualBox, but then you install other tools that come with it. There's like toolkits and stuff like that. So usually when you're installing VirtualBox, you're installing 2 other executables. This is all in the VirtualBox system. It pretty clearly shows you what to do. And it allows you to do stuff like, for example, if I've got a virtual machine running and I want to move my cursor out of it, without these tools, I have to hit weird key sets, key combinations, but without it, I can just move back and forth. Copy and paste between a virtual machine and a host machine, very helpful. Just little things like that. Okay. All right. So the other thing I want to show you guys is I got Ubuntu Desktop here. Now the important thing that I need to make sure you guys notice is that we don't have an operating system on here. So one of the things I'm going to have to do is go into Settings. Now watch this. This is great because you have to do this. Remember, I'm just making a virtual machine. I'm not making a virtual operating system. So what I want to do is I'm going to make a bootable it's going to treat it like it's a optical media. So what I can do is I just clicked here. Notice I clicked on the empty thing, and then I can go pick a particular ISO. Oh, it's not downloaded yet. Grr. Here, I'll pick one that I know is already here. And what I can do is do that. And then what happens is when I actually start the virtual machine, it will boot off that. Just like if you threw in a bootable thumb drive or bootable optical media, it would boot off that. And that's really important, and people forget this really critical issue, and that is just because you made a virtual machine, you're still going to have to put an operating system on there. You got to do it. And that's how you do it, is you boot to it or use a live CD, whatever you want to do. Also, sidebar, I tried that Hiram's, that boot recovery CD. It actually worked pretty good for password recovery. It used some tools that I hadn't seen for a while, but it worked good. All right, I don't want to get too far off track here. All right, so what I want to do now is let's take a look at a very simplistic idea of how Docker does containers. So let me get that brought up here real quick. Okay, so what you're looking at right here is a Docker server, and there's actually an app called Bulletin Board. So if we take a look in here, I can't make this bigger, easier, guys. I'm sorry. That's way too small. Yeah, sorry. I'm not going to be. I can't change it quickly. Anyway, so you can see, in particular, there's one thing, it's hard to see, it's called Docker file. And let me bring up, I've got another thing. So what we're looking at here, this is actually my local machine here, and I've got this is an SSH connection to that server. That's all we got there. So let's see if the LS shows up a little bit better here. A little bit better. Now do you see Docker file right there? Right there. That's kind of the cornerstone of the actual image itself. So let me less that guy. All right. Now this one's really small. Wait, now this one I might be able to make bigger. Burr, burr, burr. No. All right. Well, anyway, what's important here is I want you to see one line in particular. So it's saying, pull in certain libraries, the working directory, copy the JSON file. This is a JavaScript into the current directory, and then what actually starts the thing. But in particular, do you see this expose 8080? It's a web app, right? So we're not only just packaging all the files necessary to be able to run this web app, we can also set parameters, which I had discussed earlier. And these parameters allow us to do really fun stuff like setting what are my listening ports, what's the IP address. I got all kinds of stuff I can do. All right. Let me get you back over there. All right, so we're going to use this SSH session in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this particular command. Sorry for the small size, guys. Every time I think I'm clever, I don't get it right. So what's happened here is I've written the code here on my local machine, and I want to publish it over to that server, and this is the actual publishing command. So sudo docker run publish, and what I'm saying is I want to use port 8000, but then redirect it to 8080, which is what the actual container is going to be listening on, and then give it a name. I call it BB, and I take it from an image file called Bulletin Board version 1.0. So the moment I publish that, it starts running. I mean, it's running. So this is a web app, and it's on port 8000, which is being redirected internally to 8080 through the container. If I've done it right, and I know the IP address of my server, I should be able to actually see that web app now. Yay. So if you see up here, this is actually the internal IP address of my server, and you see I'm using the colon to port it to 8000, but that's the actual tool. This is the web app itself up and running within my server, and that's exactly what these guys are designed to do. So hopefully that guy gives you guys a basic understanding of the difference between a virtual machine versus a container. They're different animals. They have a similarity in that one virtualizes the hardware, the other one virtualizes the operating system. If you're going to be talking about containers today, you will be talking about Docker. That's probably, by far its most common place to be used. Make sure you know the difference of hypervisors and stuff like that. You will get tested directly by CompTIA on multiple examinations on stuff like that. And have fun. I got to tell you, you understand, if it wasn't for virtualization and to a smaller extent containerization, we would never have the cloud. I mean, that's what really made it all happen. Virtualization is a powerful tool. If you get onto a website today, any website, the chances of you actually hitting a real computer as opposed to a virtualized one are almost nil, because virtualization makes our life much, much happier. Containerization makes our programmers' development life much, much happier, and when everybody's happy, well, the IT guys are happy too. Whew, all right, that's about all I've got on that. Let's go back and see what we have for questions. Oh God, parallels. What is with you and you Apple people, you know? Guard Burgess, you're just a young pup. Are you talking to me? Oh, it looks like we got some good questions already being answered. Thank you so much, Diego and Scott. Kevin Lopez, if you allocate too much RAM to your virtual machines, will that hurt your host machines, such as a laptop? Will it hurt it? No, but it's going to slow it down to a crawl, and you're going to end up getting swap files kicking in and stuff like that, which would be questionable in terms of a VM that might have timing issues. So you're not going to break anything, you just might end up having to reboot the computer. In other words, if that's all you got to play with, go ahead and play with it, but just do like smaller distros of Linux or something like that. Yeah, Parallels, Diego, is something you have to pay for. Generic driver is the only emulation on VMs, right? Yes, Joe, doggone it. You know, theoretically, a virtual machine does not do emulation. Well, sometimes they do, in particular in their ability to emulate different types of network cards. And you absolutely got it right that there's a lot of different cards they can emulate in there. All right. Do you have to pay for Docker? No. I didn't. It all installed just fine, ran like a champ. I am not sophisticated with Docker, other than supporting smart guys like Michael Smyer who use it on a daily basis. I'm assured that there are other tools involved. They have their own website and groups and stuff like that. There's probably some place you have to make some kind of payment. All right. Okay, guys, well, it looks like the end of the day. Wow, it just always blows me away how fast these things go. I should stop talking about my sewers so much. Scott Jernigan's going, yeah, absolutely. So tomorrow's going to be ports, huh? All right. So what I think we're going to do tomorrow for ports is I'm going to break it down by A+ and Net+ mainly. We'll probably, we'll do Security Plus too. And the end result is I'm going to build 3 tables. Probably already have these tables somewhere. But we're going to build the tables, and we're just going to pound them out. What I will do to make it worth your while to show up is we'll be giving away 2 $25 gift certificates tomorrow for those of you who are good at memorizing port numbers, because that's really all it's about. We will talk about the protocols that are associated with the ports, but that's all it's going to be. So if you do have questions, please, please, please send them to me via email. Let me get that up one more time. I know we're running past Scott, I'm sorry. Please write down my email addresses. This is always the best way to get a hold of me. Also remember that just because you guys are kind enough to show up today, you get 60% off our A Plus and Net Plus Total Tester and Total Sims bundles using the code MMLive427. All right. So guys, that's all I got for today. I will hopefully see you protocol and port people tomorrow. We'll cover all that. I still don't know what we're doing on Friday. It'll be fun though, I guarantee it. But yeah, let's go ahead and knock that out. Also, if you want me to do a bigger drill down on virtual machines, in particular, Windows-based ones, we could do something like that if you'd like. I cannot do Hyper-V on, this is a very high-end laptop, but if I install Hyper-V on this, I won't be able to use any other virtual machines. So I'm not going to be able to do that. I can talk about it though, and maybe we could bring in another system, or I could do a remote in. I'll talk to Michael Smyer to help me out with that. But until then, guys, I will see you, and we will be here every Monday through Friday at 2 o'clock Central Daylight Time to ask Mike anything in the world of CompTIA. So until then, kids, this is your Uncle Mike saying good night. Good night.